What truly drives power? The noble virtues of righteousness, or the ruthless pursuit of dominance? This question has echoed through history, from ancient philosophies to modern boardrooms. It highlights a timeless tension between moral integrity and cutthroat ambition. On one side, we have the ideal of the righteous leader, guided by ethics, humility, empathy, and integrity. On the other, the ruthless ruler, driven by fear, control, and dominance at all costs. First, we need to define what we mean by power in two very different lights. Picture two leaders. One leads with righteousness, treating others with respect, acting with humility, guided by a moral compass. The other leads with ruthlessness, imposing their will through intimidation, bending rules, and showing no mercy in pursuit of their goals. These are two starkly contrasting approaches to power. Righteous power is rooted in ethics and integrity. It's the power of influence rather than coercion. A righteous leader inspires loyalty by doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. Their strength comes from principles, honesty, empathy, fairness, humility. This kind of power lifts people up. It's often quiet but immensely strong, built on trust and respect. Ruthless power is grounded in fear and control. It's the might makes right mentality. A ruthless person seeks to dominate, to win at any cost. They might use fear as a tool, making others submit through intimidation or violence, whether literal or metaphorical. This approach often disregards ethics. The ends justify the means. It can be loud, aggressive, and forceful. Psychiatrist and philosopher David R. Hawkins offers a compelling take on this dichotomy in Power vs. Force. He argues that true power aligns with higher values and consciousness, whereas force is a crude, lower-level substitute. According to Hawkins, real power comes from qualities like love, truth, and courage, energies that uplift and unify, while force relies on coercion, deception, and aggression, which ultimately breed resistance. He explains that power enlivens and supports, whereas force manipulates and suppresses. In his words, power is associated with positive emotions, peace, joy, compassion, and makes things work, whereas force gets its way through coercion and leads to negative consequences. To illustrate, Hawkins notes that power is inherently constructive. It energizes, gives forth, supplies, and supports, appealing to what is noble in human nature. Force, by contrast, constantly consumes. It has an insatiable appetite and must constantly prop itself up. Force may achieve results through fear or manipulation, but it always creates a counterforce, opposition, and pushback, because people resent being oppressed. Think of it this way: power brings people together, whereas force drives people apart. This fundamental difference will echo throughout our exploration. So, in defining power, we set the stage. Righteous power is strength of character. Ruthless power is strength of control. Now, let's explore each path further, starting with the power of righteousness. What does righteous power look like in action? To answer that, let's draw from ancient wisdom and modern research. Nearly 2,000 years ago, one of the most powerful men on earth, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, was also one of its most humble philosophers. In his Meditations, written as personal reflections, Aurelius emphasized mastering oneself over controlling others. He famously wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This simple Stoic insight speaks volumes. True strength comes from within. Aurelius is reminding us that real power is self-mastery, the ability to govern your own reactions, emotions, and principles. A righteous leader focuses on controlling their own ego and impulses rather than trying to control everyone around them. By staying calm, disciplined, and virtuous in the face of life's chaos, one develops an unshakable inner power. As the Stoics believed, no one can take away your integrity or character unless you surrender it. This inner fortitude is the core of righteous power. Marcus Aurelius's life provides a clear example. As emperor, he wielded absolute authority, yet he chose to rule with moderation and justice. He saw himself as a servant of Rome, bound by duty and virtue. He often reminded himself to remain humble and avoid the temptations of vanity and tyranny. This humility didn't make him weak. If anything, it made him a stronger, more respected leader. Righteous power, as Aurelius shows, is about moral courage and humility, doing what is right, not what is easy or self-serving. Now fast forward to the corporate world of the 20th century. Jim Collins, in his acclaimed book Good to Great, studied companies that made the leap from average performance to sustained excellence. What he found was striking. At the helm of every great company was what he termed a Level 5 leader, and these leaders were the embodiment of righteous power in business. Collins describes Level 5 leaders as having a powerful mixture of personal humility and indomitable will. They are incredibly ambitious, but their ambition is first and foremost for the cause or the company and its purpose, not for themselves. In other words, they channel their drive into something bigger than their own ego. Such leaders combine humility. They're often described as modest or even shy, giving credit to others for success, with intense professional will, an almost stoic determination to do whatever it takes for the long-term good of the organization. Collins gives real examples. One CEO, Darwin Smith of Kimberly-Clark, was a quiet, unpretentious man who nonetheless made bold, even risky decisions to transform his company. For instance, selling the mills and investing in consumer brands. He showed iron will for the mission, not for personal glory, and it paid off immensely. Collins contrasts this with the commonly held idea that great leaders have big personalities or ego-driven charisma. In fact, the truly great leaders in his study were often self-effacing. They display a compelling modesty, are self-effacing and understated, yet they also have an incurable need to produce sustained results. This is righteous power in a nutshell: humble in character, bold in action. Crucially, these righteous leaders lift up others. Collins notes that Level 5 leaders set up their successors for even greater success, whereas ego-driven leaders often set their successors up for failure. Because righteous leaders are motivated by the mission and the team's welfare, they want the organization to thrive even beyond their tenure. They mentor, they plan for succession, and they build enduring values into the culture. In contrast, a more selfish leader might grab short-term wins for themselves, but leave a mess for those who follow. We'll explore that more soon. So, the power of righteousness might not come with fanfare or fear. It's often quiet, principled, and resilient. It builds trust. Employees, citizens, or followers under such leadership know their well-being is cared for, and that their leader's strength is principled. Over time, this trust turns into loyalty and a shared sense of purpose. Whether it's Marcus Aurelius leading an empire or a Level 5 CEO leading a company, the pattern is clear. When power is wielded with integrity and humility, it creates a legacy of strength and greatness that outlasts the individual. Now, on the flip side, what about ruthless power? History is replete with examples of leaders who seized and exercised power through intimidation, aggression, and cruelty. We cannot deny that ruthlessness can be a form of power, and often a very effective one in the short term. Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*. A brief history of humankind offers sobering reminders of how our species has often used force to dominate. Harari points out that Homo sapiens, us humans, became the most dominant species on the planet in part by being, frankly, quite ruthless. Early humans drove competing species like Neanderthals to extinction, possibly through violence or by monopolizing resources. And when it came to conflicts among Homo sapiens, our record isn't much better. As Harari starkly puts it, competition for resources flared up into violence and genocide. Tolerance is not a sapiens trademark. In modern times, he notes, even a small difference in skin color, dialect, or religion has often been enough to prompt one group of sapiens to try to exterminate another. In other words, the drive for dominance has repeatedly led humans to commit horrendous acts. Harari's question, would ancient sapiens have been more tolerant toward an entirely different human species, is painfully rhetorical. The likely answer is no. Our history of war, conquest, and oppression suggests that ruthless power, the willingness to use violence and fear, has been a tragic part of how humans gained and maintained power. Consider the great conquerors and tyrants of history. Empires were built by force, Roman legions crushing rivals, Genghis Khan's Mongol hordes spreading terror, colonial powers subjugating nations across oceans. These leaders wielded fear like a weapon. Their power was very real and very observable. They commanded obedience. In many cases, ruthlessness did bring success. Empires expanded, kingdoms grew wealthy from plunder, competitors were eliminated. The lesson many might draw is that might makes right. If you are brutal enough, you can impose your will. We see echoes of this even in the business world. A CEO might rule their company with an iron fist, firing employees at the slightest dip in profits, cutting ethical corners, instilling a culture of fear to hit targets. In the short run, this ruthless leadership can look successful. Costs are slashed, productivity spikes from terrified workers, the stock price might even shoot up. Jim Collins's research in Good to Great found that some of the comparison companies, those that failed to become great, did have larger-than-life, egocentric leaders who drove intense short-term results. However, there was a dark flip side. Collins notes that in 2/3 of those mediocre companies, the leaders' gargantuan personal egos ultimately contributed to the demise or continued mediocrity of the company. In other words, ruthlessness often sows the seeds of long-term failure even as it reaps short-term rewards. An example from business lore is the story of Chainsaw Al Dunlap, a CEO infamous for his ruthless cost-cutting in the 1990s. He would slash thousands of jobs and close factories to boost stock prices. Initially, it earned him a reputation as a turnaround artist and Wall Street darling. That's the short-term power of ruthlessness. But in the longer term, his companies, like Sunbeam, crumbled under accounting scandals and dysfunction. Employees had been demoralized, and the trust was gone. The very aggression that produced a quick win also poisoned the well. Similarly, history's tyrants often meet ignoble ends. The fear they instill can turn to hatred. Sometimes they are overthrown by those they oppressed, or their empires collapse under their own weight. Yet, during their reign, they do command power. Their forceful tactics can keep them on top for years or decades, demonstrating that ruthlessness can indeed get results, but often at a heavy cost, a cost we'll examine next. If ruthless power can achieve such dramatic results, one might wonder, what's the downside? Why not choose fear and force if they get you ahead? This is where we must consider the hidden costs of ruthlessness, the ways in which forceful dominance undermines itself and exacts a toll on leaders and societies alike. One major cost is resistance and instability. Remember Hawkins's insight. Force always creates counterforce. Its effect is to polarize rather than unify. When you impose your will through brute force or intimidation, people may obey on the surface, but underneath they often simmer with resentment. They comply because they have to, not because they want to. This means the moment your grip weakens, the opposition surges. A ruler who governs by fear must stay ever vigilant because enemies, external or internal, will be waiting for any chance to strike back. Force requires constant defense. It's a never-ending effort to maintain power. This creates enormous stress and volatility. It's like clutching sand in your fist. Squeeze too hard and it starts to slip away. Hawkins also describes how force is inherently draining. Unlike true power, which energizes and gives life, force constantly consumes energy. A leader who rules ruthlessly has to keep using pressure tactics to enforce their will. It's exhausting, like running a perpetual campaign of coercion. Subordinates, too, are drained. Working or living under fear saps creativity, loyalty, and morale. Sure, you might get compliance, but you won't get enthusiasm or genuine commitment. People eventually burn out or look for a way out. The environment created by force is brittle, the appearance of strength covering an undercurrent of fragility. Another hidden cost is in the quality of decisions and relationships. When dissent is crushed and everyone is afraid to speak truth to power, the leader starts to live in an echo chamber of their own making. They may become overconfident, even delusional, because no one dares contradict them. History is full of dictators who made disastrous mistakes because their yes men told them only what they wanted to hear. In business, a culture of fear can lead to bad decisions going unchallenged until it's too late. Ruthlessness can thus undermine wisdom, blinding leaders to reality. David Hawkins would also argue there's a spiritual or psychological cost. Operating at the level of force means living in anger, pride, or fear, which he categorizes as lower levels of consciousness. These states are stressful and unsustainable in the long run. They take a toll on one's mental and emotional well-being. Hawkins writes that force has transient goals. When those goals are reached, the emptiness of meaninglessness remains. This is a powerful observation. If you climb to the top by being ruthless, you might find that the victory feels hollow. You've alienated others, maybe compromised your values, and once the adrenaline of winning fades, you're left with emptiness. Ruthless ambition often comes with loneliness and a lack of fulfillment. It's the classic scenario of achieving the world but losing one's soul in the process. Now, consider the societal consequences of ruthless power. Marcus Aurelius, reflecting on fame and legacy, wrote, "All things fade and quickly turn to myth. And I am talking of those who shone with some wonderful brilliance, what in any case is everlasting memory, utter emptiness." In other words, glory is fleeting. Even the mightiest conqueror or the most feared tycoon will be dust and forgotten tales in due time. Aurelius's Stoic reminder puts our life's pursuits in perspective. If you choose a path that causes suffering or injustice, any triumph you gain will eventually fade, and you'll be left with the moral repercussions of your actions. Empires built on cruelty tend to crumble, and history often judges ruthless figures harshly. Their legacies become cautionary tales, myths of warning, rather than celebrated memories. Furthermore, a society ruled by ruthlessness suffers from a climate of fear and mistrust. Innovation and creativity diminish because people are afraid to take risks or speak up. Social cohesion erodes. Instead of rallying around shared ideals, people either cower or rebel. We see this in companies with toxic cultures, high turnover, scandals, and eventually collapse or stagnation. We see it in nations under dictators. Eventually, oppression either explodes into chaos or implodes as the regime can't sustain itself, economically or morally. Simply put, force is brittle. It might hold things together for a while, but it doesn't truly unite people. It freezes them in place until the ice cracks. So, the hidden costs of ruthlessness include constant struggle against opposition, emotional and physical exhaustion, poor decision-making environments, hollow victories, and negative long-term outcomes for communities and organizations. Force can seize power, but it cannot create the loyalty, love, or respect that give power its deepest strength and staying power. This brings us to the ultimate question: which kind of power actually lasts? Let's return to our opening question. Righteousness or ruthlessness? Which path leads to enduring power? When the dust settles and time tests the results, which approach stands the test of time? Both history and research strongly indicate that it is righteous, principled power that truly lasts, whereas ruthless power often burns brightly and then burns out. It's a bit like the story of the tortoise and the hare. The principled leader may seem slower or gentler, the tortoise, and the ruthless leader may race ahead early, the hare. But over the long run, integrity and consistency win the race. Jim Collins's findings in Good to Great exemplify this. The companies with values-driven, Level 5 leadership not only achieved greatness, but maintained it even after those leaders departed. Why? Because their leadership built strong foundations, cultures of discipline, ethics, and teamwork that continued to thrive. Those leaders set their companies up for continued success by empowering others and instilling the right values. On the other hand, companies that had a hotshot, ego-driven boss at the top often saw that success unravel once the mastermind left or ran out of steam. Collins observed that egocentric leaders might get impressive results while they're in command, but they often set up their successors for failure, and the company slips into mediocrity or chaos afterwards. In effect, if the power of an organization resides only in one fearsome figure, it vanishes when that figure leaves, or when people finally refuse to tolerate them. But if the power is distributed through shared values and inspired employees, it endures. Enduring power multiplies itself. Fleeting power dies with the person who wielded it. We also see enduring power in the realm of social movements. Think of Mahatma Gandhi. At first glance, he had none of the conventional markers of power. No wealth, no weapons, no formal authority. He faced the British Empire, which was arguably a ruthlessly powerful force of its time. And yet, Gandhi's philosophy of non-violent resistance, rooted in moral truth, galvanized millions of people. It was a form of righteous power. The British initially responded with force, jailings, beatings, even massacres, the typical tools of ruthless power. In the short term, that force caused pain, but it could not break the movement's spirit. Over time, the moral force of Gandhi's cause won international sympathy and sapped the will of the colonizers. As Hawkins notes, pointing to this very example, power always wins over force. It's how and why Gandhi ultimately triumphed over an empire built on force. Today, Gandhi is remembered and revered worldwide, while the once mighty British Empire has largely dissolved, and its legacy is mixed, often remembered for the injustices of colonial rule. The power of integrity proved more enduring than the power of coercion. Consider also the legacy of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. versus dictators like, say, Joseph Stalin. Dr. King, through righteous power, passionate appeals to justice and equality, non-violence, and personal sacrifice, changed the course of American history and inspired movements across the globe. His influence persists in laws, in improved attitudes, and in the hearts of people who still quote his words today. Stalin, through ruthlessness, industrialized a nation and won a war, but he also left a legacy of terror, millions of deaths, and a society so traumatized that decades later it is still recovering. King's power uplifted and is fondly remembered. Stalin's fear-based power died with him and is remembered with horror by most. One might say righteous power plants seeds that grow. Ruthless power pours salt on the earth. Even on a personal level, think about influence. Who has truly influenced you in your life? Someone who cared about you, led by example, and earned your respect. A teacher, parent, mentor? Or someone who bullied or scared you into doing something? Fear might get an immediate reaction, but respect and trust can shape your whole character. The people we admire and remember are usually those who were kind, principled, and inspiring. That is everyday righteous power, and it lasts in our minds and hearts. Yuval Noah Harari notes that while violence has an impact on history, so do cooperation and shared ideals. Human tribes that bonded together around common beliefs often outlasted those that ruled by fear alone. For instance, religions and nations bind people not by force — you can't force true belief — but by shared stories and values, which can survive for centuries. Meanwhile, regimes held up only by force often crumble when people lose their fear. So, when asking which power lasts, the evidence suggests the power that comes from genuine leadership, virtue, and higher principles creates a legacy. The power won by cruelty and deceit is inherently unstable and temporary. As an old saying goes, nice guys finish last. But in reality, the good people often finish first when it comes to legacy and impact. It might not always seem so in the heat of the moment, but over the arc of time, integrity and goodness build something that endures. At this point, this isn't just a theoretical discussion, it becomes a deeply personal question for each of us. In our own lives, big or small, we face moments where we choose between these two paths. It might be in your career. Do you climb the ladder by pushing others down or by lifting others up? It might be in relationships. Do you dominate your partner or communicate with empathy and respect? It could even be a split-second decision in an argument. Do I want to win by hurting this person or resolve by understanding them? Take a moment to reflect on your values and experiences. When you're at a crossroads, will you choose power through integrity or dominance through ruthlessness? This question isn't always easy. Choosing integrity can feel like you're giving up an advantage. Doing the right thing might mean you don't take a tempting shortcut to success. Being empathetic might feel vulnerable, especially if others around you are cutthroat. Meanwhile, being ruthless might seem rewarding in the short term. You get what you want, you don't get hurt, or so it seems. But think about the long-term consequences for your soul, your relationships, and your sense of self. If you've ever taken the ruthless route, how did you feel afterward? And when you've chosen the righteous route, what kind of satisfaction did it bring? Chances are, when you acted with integrity, you felt more at peace, more powerful in a true sense, and those around you probably responded with trust or gratitude. That is a lasting reward no medal or stolen advantage can match. It's also empowering to realize that righteousness doesn't mean weakness. Setting boundaries or standing up for what's right is a form of power, and it can be done without cruelty. You can be firm and courageous without losing compassion. Think of a person you respect who has both kindness and backbone. That's the ideal to strive for. We each have the capacity for both approaches, the angel and the devil on our shoulders, so to speak. Empowerment comes from consciously choosing the higher path, even when the lower path beckons. Marcus Aurelius gives us a clear mandate in this regard. He said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." It's a call to action. Instead of debating in our minds whether we should be kind or tough, or rationalizing why maybe a bit of ruthlessness is okay, we should simply live our values. Choose to be the good person, the good leader, the good colleague right now. Aurelius, as a man who wielded immense power, is telling us that the debate is over. Being good is the way. So ask yourself, what kind of power do I want to embody in my own life? When the pressure is on, will I resort to force, raising my voice, making threats, cutting corners, or will I hold to my principles, stay calm, and lead by example? This is not easy. Everyone slips up sometimes. But each day is a new chance to practice righteous power in small ways, by listening, by empathizing, by staying honest, by helping others. Over time, those small choices forge your character. And your character is the true source of your influence and power in the world. It can be incredibly inspiring to realize that you don't have to play dirty to win in life. In fact, playing clean is the winning strategy in the long run. You can reach your goals and look yourself in the mirror with pride. You can succeed and have deep friendships and respect. That's not naive. It's a robust way to live. Think back to all the wisdom we've tapped into. A Stoic emperor, a modern historian, a business guru, a spiritual teacher, all different perspectives. But a common theme emerges. Your mind and conscience are your power. Fear and force are illusions of power. As Marcus Aurelius would remind us, the power of choosing to be a good person is in your hands every moment. That's real empowerment. So, what truly drives power? Righteousness or ruthlessness? After examining both sides, the answer shines through. Righteous power is the power that truly drives and transforms. Ruthless power may impose and grab, but it ultimately fades. To put it succinctly, righteousness is power that lasts. Ruthlessness is mere force that crumbles. The noble virtues, integrity, empathy, humility, courage, these are not just lofty ideals, but practical tools for building a life, a company, or a society that thrives in the long run. They generate trust, loyalty, creativity, and stability. In contrast, the ruthless pursuit of dominance generates fear, resentment, and fragility. It might build an empire or amass a fortune for a time, but at what cost and for how long? As we've seen, fear-based power is usually unsustainable. It either collapses from within or is overthrown from without. Meanwhile, the influence of righteous leadership endures and spreads, often growing stronger even after the leader is gone. Now, I want to challenge and invite you to take this message to heart in your own life. The next time you face a challenge or a chance to lead, whether it's at work, in your family, or among friends, choose authenticity, integrity, and resilience over shortcuts and intimidation. Remember that doing the right thing builds a foundation that can weather any storm. It's not always the quickest route, but it's the one that will stand firm when quick fixes fail. Ask yourself, which path will you choose? Righteous or ruthless, and why? I encourage you to reflect on this and share your thoughts. Have you witnessed a situation where integrity proved to be the stronger path? Or have you learned lessons from seeing ruthless tactics backfire? Leave a comment below with your experiences or decisions. Which path do you choose, and why do you believe in it? I'd love to hear your stories and perspectives on how these principles play out in real life. In the end, Each of us defines the legacy of our own power by the choices we make. As we part, keep this in mind. Great power comes not from the strength of our dominance, but from the strength of our character. Be the kind of powerful that heals, inspires, and endures. Be righteous, be bold, and be the example of the true power you want to see in the world. Your future self and the world around you will thank you for it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, be the good and powerful person you are meant to be.